All right, welcome back here in the Major Wrestling Figure Podcast. We're very proud, very excited to have on with us Le Champion, Chris Jericho.
Woo! I have been waiting for this for at least 10, 15 minutes. So
This is your big break, kid.
it is, man. I finally made the big time.
I mean,
man,
Chris,
so happy
we
for you.
talk about figure fate on the show, and I don't know if there's a more serious case of figure fate than WWF New York. I'll paint the picture for you. WWF New York, May 14th, 2000, my birthday. My parents take me into the city. They somehow finagle Chris Jericho to be on my cake, and they take me to the little store upstairs, and I get your Titantron, I think it's Series 3 figure. And now all these years later, you are a guest on the Major Wrestling Figure Podcast.
Wow.
That is figure fate right there.
Figure
Talk
fate.
about full circle. That's so funny. There's a Chris Jericho birthday cake. There was a lot of stuff like that I didn't know. There was a Chris Jericho bowling ball that I still don't have one. I'd like to have a Chris Jericho bowling ball and a Chris Jericho cake frozen in time forever.
So I guess that's one question. Do you collect all of your stuff or any of it at all?
No, and here's the thing. It's funny because when I first heard about your show and you wanted me to do it, I was like, oh yeah, I'll talk about all the stuff that, I used to get when I was a kid, but just the stuff that I've had since I've been in the business. They don't send us anything.
Yeah, I know. People think like it's just plentiful.
Yeah, people think that it's going to be plentiful and you're going to get, they'll send me a box every once in a while of like 15 of the same ones. So then I'll give them away as like Christmas presents or whatever. But there is so many action figures to this day that the only reason I know they exist is because people come to get them signed when I do autograph sessions. So, because I think really early on in WWE, when I started there in 99, I realized that every time you wore a new outfit, a new costume, or had a new look, that they would make a figure of it. So I constantly, usually once a month at the least, get a new pair of tights. So I think I have almost probably 200 action figures, if not more, at this point in time.
I was going to say you're in that upper echelon of, I don't know if it could be calculated or collected,
Right.
where you can say I have everything, because I don't even know if that's possible, to be honest with you.
I sure would like to know. I mean, if out there, if
Trust me, our fans after hearing you on this, I'm sure someone will certainly try to compile a list.
yeah.
It's got to be pretty epic.
Speaking of lists, there's the list Chris Jericho figure that has the list, a nice ringside exclusive. That was a good one.
Yeah, there's so many of them, man. I mean, there was one that kind of had a glow in the dark lights on the light up jacket, and it's funny how much they've progressed over the years. You guys know this. I mean, the first couple ones that I had, I looked like Skeletor in the face with like this really crappy wig, or like a hairline that starts up here or a hairline that starts there. And now obviously they have it so well done and so well polished. I mean, they haven't come out yet, but we just did the New York Toy Fair, which I'm sure you guys were probably there at the Javits Center, like a month before the world ended. And they did a whole rollout of the new AEW figures, and those are incredible. They were so good, so much detail and everything like that. So I'm excited for when those come out.
Yeah, so we were there covering Toy Fair, but because of where we worked at the time, we couldn't go in. So we had our producer Mark go in and take all the pictures and videos. But now I can't wait.
We dropped them off like it was we dropped them off like it was a daycare. We were like, go, and then we came back and picked them up after we got all the coverage.
Well, let me give you the other side of the coin. I was downstairs and I wanted to go see the WWE setup, and they said I couldn't go. I'm like, I can't. I mean, I've made these guys millions of dollars in action figures. You tell me I can't go up there? So I walked up there, and there was a security guard who wouldn't let me in, but one of the guys that works for whatever company WWE is with was like, oh, come on in. And I came in, and I was filming some stuff just on my Instagram story, just because, like, here I am at the horror comic stuff, and here I am at WWE. And the guy said, please don't post that. I could lose my job. I'm like, is this where we're at? Like, you're going to lose your job because you let the enemy in to just look at by the way, it was a really shitty setup that the WWE had compared to our setup. I was very surprised.
It's been much
WWE
discussed on this show, yeah. They basically got their asses kicked.
The guy who was giving the tour of the booth, I found him on IMDb. He was just an actor. And so he kept we found him doing the same bit over and over and over. And like he had no idea we were WWE superstars. We found him on IMDb.
We filmed him and talked to him, and he had no idea. He's been very exposed.
I was so surprised because WWE is usually so spot on when it comes to that sort of thing, especially being in New York, and especially knowing that we were going to be there.
In their defense, their strategy was, I think they knew AEW was going to roll this out and kick their ass, and they were saving everything for Access. That didn't happen.
Oh, gotcha.
They were going to unveil all their cool stuff there.
It's funny because you work for a different company and they wouldn't let you in. At first, they wouldn't let us in.
Yeah, that's true.
They wouldn't let you into your own WWE, or they
you
wouldn't
have to go through like 3 security guards and checkpoints, and it's
we had to call somebody hey, we're WWE covering the toys. Can we come in?
Yeah.
Speak
to your actor who's going to regurgitate bullshit to us.
But let me ask you guys a question. So, action figures, are they still as important and as popular now as they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
More than ever.
I want to say more than ever.
People going back and getting the actual retro ones they had. Then there's the ones being recreated now, like in their retro, the way they did look back then, that Mattel calls them flashbacks or whatever. And I think kind of like what we had discussed through this podcast, we've made it more okay to be like, man, I love collecting toys, and being okay with saying that out loud and being proud of it. So the collecting community and nostalgia is through the roof right now.
And there's so many different types of collectors and fans. Of course, there's the little kid who gets it and plays with it. Then there's the guy who wants to keep it in the package and hope to resell it later. But then there's the guy who takes it, and it's called figure photography, like sets up like mini arenas and does the poses and takes the professional pictures. There's so many different types of fans, and that's why I think the podcast catches on, because there's so many ways to enjoy this.
See, I used to. First of all, I have this up in my office. It's a little.
What is that?
There it is.
Yeah, what is?
A little die-cast Jericho. I didn't even know it existed. So it's about an inch tall. But I used to do that with action figures all the time. And it's funny because I'm in my office, and I just recently sold my house, and I found this set of Star Trek action figures from the 70s.
Oh, Miko.
There you go, Miko. So it's Captain Kirk, and I've got Spock, a Klingon, Mr. Scott, Uhura, Dr.
So those are your originals from childhood?
These are originals from like 1976 or whatever, and I'm sure you guys.
They're yours, like from your childhood, or you rebought them at some point?
No, they're mine. I found them. Cool. My mom passed away years ago, and I had all the boxes in my old house, which was just moved out a year ago. And I found these, and I was like, "Oh, these are the exact ones," So I've been a big action figure collector since I was a kid, because also as well, I got hip to Star Wars right when it came out. I was 6 years old when it came out.
There you go.
And the first two I ever had was a Chewbacca and a Luke Skywalker, and they might have been two of the first quote-unquote plastic action figures ever.
Yeah, those have changed the game, because prior to that, things were more like that Mego, like a doll almost.
Right, yeah, G.I. Joe dolls and all that sort of thing.
The Star Wars phenomenon and boom really changed the game as far as where things became action figures like that.
Chris, you would love if you came over to my toy room. I have everything. I have a Star Wars section, a wrestling section, a Ghostbusters section. But you have to do the old Scott Hall walk to get into the room, because there's so much display cases, and you might knock something over. But one day you'll come over. We'll have a little bit of bubbly, and we'll we'll cook some steaks. On the show we do a lot of steaks and figs. We eat some steaks, talk about figs.
Well, now we're allowed to be friends again.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. We can acknowledge that we know each other. Did you catch the 80s LJN rubber wrestlers? Did you catch that as a kid?
I did. I got into wrestling in the early 80s with my grandmother, and then I became a huge WWF fan. But I was 16, 17 years old, so my Star Wars period was from about 77 to 83, and by 83 I was starting to get out of toys. So I did collect a few action figures, but it wasn't like I had to have every one, because there was LJN. I'm sure there was a Galoob. Was there something from Galoob or something?
Yes, WCW Galoob, yeah.
There you go. And I remember, too, at one point, it was one of those things where I went through a phase at about 16 where I was like, I want to get back into just a quick little childhood trip. And I asked my aunt to buy me some wrestling figures for Christmas, and she bought me some generic ones. They weren't even WWE guys. They were
Oh,
like,
bootleg.
here's,
Oh, no.
Bootleg.
here's Smasher Smith, and I'm like, that's not what I wanted.
There's a
no.
market for those, man. You'd be surprised. There's a market for those where people collect just straight up bootlegs because they think it's cool and unique. You know.
I'm sure there is. They were just random. They were just like when you bought a bunch of soldiers when you were a kid, the plastic soldiers, just to have something to play with. But
We had just made our own wrestling figures, the major wrestling figure podcast ones, but since we worked for WWE, we had to put masks on them, and we designed them to look like the bootleg figures, you know, and
That's
like
great, yeah.
it's like so bad that it's good, and like you clearly can tell it's me under the mask, and same with Brian. But now it was us all along.
it's interesting. Like for me, when I was at WCW, that's when the first video game came out that I was in, and then the first action figure. And there's two funny stories with my first two action figures. The first one was a set with Dean Malenko, and the
Grip and flip.
fists. Yeah, the fists would stick together, right, with magnets.
Grip and flip, baby.
Grip and flips.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so my wife, now she's my girlfriend at the time, she found one and bought it at Walmart or whatever. And on the slip, on the receipt, it didn't say Malenko Jericho. It said Hogan Sting. And that's where I realized every single action figure that was sold at that time, maybe not across the world, but in that store, was attributed to Hogan. So I don't
That's
know how the
wild.
hell they
That's
did
a
that. And
wild
I've been
story.
told afterwards that's impossible. But I have the receipt that said Hogan Sting on it instead of Jericho Malenko.
I've heard a similar story, and I feel like from Big Show maybe the same thing. But I'm
Yeah.
thinking, wasn't WCW what you got paid is what you got paid? So maybe the royalties did go to Hogan.
Maybe, because I know I got a royalty check from WCW once for $0.00 in a FedEx.
So tell me this: like you get into the business, was getting an action figure of yourself like a bucket list
Huge.
priority
Huge.
for you?
I'll answer your question about the second one in a second, Matt. But for me, as a professional, the three biggest moments where you go, wow, I made it, was when, A, in my first video game, B, my first action figure, and then C, this isn't the first one, but the first time we had a Fozzy album, like an LP.
Oh, that's badass.
That was
Yeah.
the Sin and Bones record. That's what I was like, a CD is fine, but actually having an album in your hand and actually having an action figure of yourself, it was a completely different world. Like you really felt like, man, I have arrived. And then the second one, my second action figure, was they were doing kind of a. I'm telling this as if you guys don't know. You probably know exactly what it is.
They're called
Yeah, we
Ringmasters,
know it all,
Chris.
dude.
Yeah, they do like a character, like a scenario. And for me,
Yeah.
it was the lady. I remember the lady describing, you're the Lionheart, so you're going to be a lion tamer. And I'm like, that's really cool. And you'll be like a circus lion tamer. And it's going to come with an actual lion in the box with you. And then when it came out, I had a whip and I had a little chair, which I guess you hold back the lion, except for the lion was not a ferocious, Simba lion. It was a little kitty cat that looked like, a yellow cat.
With a wig on or something.
With a
right?
wig on, yeah, and that's what they came with me. So my first two and my only two WCW action figures in 3 years were those two.
Yeah, sometimes toy companies do like weird stuff like that. Like a kid just wants a wrestling figure so he can create his own wrestling league on his floor. He doesn't want Chris Jericho, the Lion Tamer. In that same set, they have Bret Hart as a sharpshooter, as a hitman. He's
He's a gangster. Luger with a torture rack. He comes with a giant torture rack where you could like kill another action figure.
Bill Goldberg
little,
is a jackhammer construction man. Come on.
He has a jackhammer. Yeah.
Oh, the
And
bulldozer.
that's like. Even I think they put this out after I left WWE. There was one that it's like Chris Jericho was a mummy, and no one ever told me about this. So I'm like, why am I suddenly a mummy? Like, what's this all
I had
about?
to do a video review of it. So your list is actually like the mummy all around your body. Like your list is coming around and going all around. It's
Yeah.
actually pretty cool, but it's weird.
It's bizarre though.
Yeah, I didn't understand the reason for that.
So I have a super embarrassing story about that Lion Tamer figure. I remember that came out. It might have came out right in like your transition between WCW and WWE.
It was right towards my end of my run there. Yeah.
So I am like so excited to get a Chris Jericho action figure and add him to my fig fed, and I immediately just like took that stupid jacket off that made no sense, and then your hair, that ponytail piece, you could spin it up to the sky like your hair was
Yes.
in WWF. So I was
I did the
like,
same
oh my
exact
God.
thing.
Yeah, I was like, we're good to go, baby. Yeah.
Chris, you don't know about fig feds? Let's explain to Chris what a fig fed is.
Explain what a fig fed is. I've never heard it.
A fig fed, a figure fed is basically like your you're taking these figures and you're the booker man, you know what I'm saying? You're creating these storylines and you're creating these shows, and you're either playing with them or, you know, you're just like making the matches. And this all came out like, you know, online internet, so now we could, you know, record our title histories and, you know, download the music off the internet. So we were the real losers.
You're
in high
really
school.
getting into it.
Oh man, like flickering the lights on and off for strobe lights, like real loser stuff.
But this is great. But are you guys doing this in your 30s, or are you doing this as teenagers?
We actually have a segment on the show where we get about as close to it as you can get, because we have a
Chris, we brought back the fig fed.
Fantasy fig fed battle, basically.
Well, let me tell you
present
this.
our shows and see who's put on the better show.
Well, let me tell you this. I think, I'm not going to say that I'm the only one, but I will say that there is 3 play sets that were released that came from my mind. 3.
Oh, we got to hear it.
Money in the Bank play set. Money in the Bank is Brian. Me and Brian Gewirtz came up with that idea and concept. 2 is the Ambrose Asylum. They released the cage with Mitch the Potted Plant as a bonus character, which I f***ing hate because I never called it Mitch the Potted Plant. Some dopey writer on WWE.com created that and became a thing. I just smashed this object over a guy's head. You could murder somebody with this. He missed SmackDown for 2 weeks, and you give him a nickname and make him a character. Poor Mitch the Potted Plant. That drove me crazy. And then the other one was the Festival of Friendship. Kevin Owens and Jericho.
Oh yeah, okay.
Chris, we have to add a 4th one to that, because what about your new ringside exclusive, a little bit of the bubbly with the table set up? So you've done so much for the business, Chris. Thank you very much.
Wow.
That's the one that's coming out. A little bit of the bubbly. It comes in a bottle that looks like, I got all this stuff as if I planned it. I really don't, but this is my set.
You're really
Saturday
prepared
special.
for this, huh?
The bubbly. The character actually comes in a bottle of bubbly that looks like this, and it has a table with like the horrible catering setup where a little bit of the bubbly came from. So yeah, that's number 4. There you go.
I can only assume when those words came out of your mouth, you didn't imagine it would take over the world and you'd have an action figure in a champagne bottle packaging.
No, and sold 25,000 of those cases. You sent me a picture of you drinking one of those.
So I was saying we were never allowed to say this before, but our business partner is Ringside Collectibles, and as kind of like a signing bonus, they sent over two bottles to each of us as like when we sealed that deal.
That's great.
We've dabbled and enjoyed already. Yeah.
Whoever knows, right? You know how wrestling is. You never know what's going to get over, and that was basically, I was backstage and I can't remember what I was supposed to do. They just needed some content after, and it was after the match, and they kept having issues. Like, I'm a live guy, and you guys know this. Like, give me one shot. I don't want to rehearse it.
Oh, I
don't want
hate
to go
doing it over and
again.
over.
Yeah. I know what I want to do. I'm going to make a lot of it up, but let's just go. And we kept rolling, and the camera had a problem, and then there was an audio problem. And finally I was like, dudes, we got to do this. I can't do this again. And so we did it, and finally it worked, and I walked around, and I was insulting people, just throwing lines out there, and I get to the back for the big catering setup, and it literally is like I had just won the title, and they said, we'll have a big spread, and then you'll spray some champagne on one of the workers. And I was like, that's cool. And I go to the back, and the spread is terrible. It's like one little cracker and 2 little things. So there's a movie, one of my favorite movies is Spinal Tap, and there's a line where one of the guys is mad because one of the olives has a pimento in it and the other one doesn't. He's like, look at this, this one's got a little guy in it, and listen, who's in there? No one's in there. So I did that at first with an olive, and I was like laughing at myself, which nobody picked up that one. And then I'm like, well, since I'm doing movie things, I'll look over at this champagne bottle, and it's from Dumb and Dumber when Lloyd Christmas goes, a little bit of the bubbly, and then they kill the owl when they shoot the cork off. It hits the owl in the face. So that's what I said. It's like, oh, there's a little guy in there, there's no one in there. All right, well, how about a little bit of the bubbly? And then I shake it and spray it on the guy, and that's it. So a couple days later, somebody posts like a video that they had edited together of that song Mambo Number 5.
Yeah.
And it goes a little bit of something on my side, a little bit of something. And they had replaced the name of the chick with Bubbly. A little bit of the bubbly on my side, a little bit of the bubbly on. And I said, that's really funny. So I'm really good at like predicting what people are going to get into. So I said, I'm going to post this on Twitter and say, this is great. If you have any other ideas, please post. And dude, that was it. The door opened and I had like 50 or 60 within an hour. And there was hundreds that came through over the next few weeks. And that's when I was like, with a little bit of the bubbly is this popular, let's try and make some bubbly champagne and let's go from there. So that's how it all started.
So cool. That's just so pro wrestling. Like, you never know. You
never know, man. When you try and come up with a catchphrase that's going to stick, it doesn't work. It's just the things you throw out off the top of your head that get over. And you can always tell if someone has a sign in the crowd. That's what Jimmy Hart taught me. He said, you can't make people write signs. He said, that's so you can tell who is over, a catchphrase that is over, because instantly the next week, if they see something cool, they'll bring a sign of it and they'll chant it. And that's when I was like, okay, I got something with this.
Wow.
I mean, Chris, like, I think all these years later, I mean, you started in WCW, WWE, obviously, now AEW, but you're still at the top, still making this bubbly figure is going to be a top seller, 100%. Yeah. Like, it's not cool, like this is not a flashback old school Chris. This is current day Chris Jericho. It's going to be a top seller, and I think it just proves that you are ahead of the curve for everything, and you've been that way your whole career.
Well, thanks, man, and that's because you have to continue to evolve. And I always use David Bowie as an example. I'm a big Bowie fan. He was never the same guy. He always changed. He changed his character. He changed the sound of his music. It was always Bowie related, but it would always go in different directions, and it was never the same. And I really always did that in WWE. But then when I left and went to New Japan and then AEW, like I said, all three of us love WWE, but it is what it is. They do things their way. And finally, I can do things my way. And there's no limitations. I'm throwing out everything. And 9 times out of 10, it gets over. Because if you're committed to it and you believe it, it's going to work. So, okay, I feel like I'm in Japan. There needs to be some paint. I'm going to do the Painmaker thing. Okay, there's another character there. Let's do a little bit of the bubbly. Let's do Le Champion. Let's do the bubbly bunch. I mean, whatever I can think of, no matter how ridiculous or how serious it is, if you commit to it, people will go, Jericho did it again. And all I'm really doing is just being committed to what my ideas are and standing behind it and doing it in a way that people will go, man, that's really cool. And that's the secret.
And I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. But I think the other thing, Chris, that I don't think you even realize is how we like to call it in the biz, toyetic you are. You're very toyetic. All your outfits are very different and colorful. So there's no, like, Chris Jericho figures over time have evolved. Your outfits have evolved. Your entrance stuff has evolved. Your hair has evolved.
Yeah, you're not just a dude in, like, black trunks over and over again. You're getting the same thing.
Well, and once again, it's all about keeping yourself relevant and changing. You know, I had long hair, then I had short hair, then I have long hair now. And I think that's something that keeps you relevant. It's also changing my scenario big time of going to AEW and working with younger guys. I don't want to work with guys my age because that puts a different spin on things. So I'd rather work with Jungle Boy and Darby Allin than whoever. So I think all those things add up to being, like you said, this guy's still at the top of his game. And, you know, I was never a body guy. I was never a super high flyer. I was never the fastest guy in the ring. So I basically have never changed. I'm still pretty much the same as I was 20 years ago. But the difference is in the character and the personality. And that's what really gets you over in wrestling. I don't care if you have a 5-star match. If you can, that's great. It's having a 5-star storyline and a 5-star personality that really puts you in the next step, in the next world.
Absolutely.
Well, don't forget 5-star figures. Don't forget 5-star figures.
There you go. You got to have those big feds.
Chris, we could talk to you all day about this. I don't want to keep you any longer, but let's end it with this. What are some of your favorite figures that you can recall that you've had of yourself throughout your career? Ones that really stand out to you?
Well, I mean, the one that you mentioned, the one with the list, I thought was cool. It came with a scarf and a vest. I love the one that was with the light up jacket. I mean, there's been so many of them, man. You know, there was a couple really cool ones from the early Y2J days with the red tights with kind of the black and silver barbed wire over them.
What about the 2-pack with China where you have the big forehead and they had to fix it?
Yeah, that was a brutal one. That was probably my least favorite one. But actually, I think I'm excited for everyone to see the AEW figures because they're really well done. They did a great job. They knew I can't remember what the company is, you guys probably remember, but the guys that created them knew they had a lot to live up to, and I think they did a great job. So those are really cool. I'm excited for people to see those because there's 2 Jericho ones coming out for sure in different costumes.
Yeah, you have 3 total because there's
3 total.
Right off the bat.
There's
So
the bubbly
I'm excited
exclusive. You're in Series 1, and then your Series 1 has like a chase variant with one has the title and one doesn't, and something
And there's
else.
there's one more I'm gonna show you here in this office. There's actually 2 of them that were really cool. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we're good. We're good, baby.
I dropped the phone. I'll pick it up here. I'll show you. So the 2 that I have right here that were made by fans actually, which are really cool.
Customs,
And one of
we
them
call 'em in the biz.
is this one. We did the on the cruise last year. We did the Alpha Club, which was the
Oh, yeah,
Young Bucks
awesome.
and Chris Jericho. So this
Yeah.
was our official gear that we had on.
That's wild. That's so good.
Yeah, they did that one. And then the other one, this is a favorite. They know once you've been being a Kiss fan. Somebody made a Paul Stanley Chris Jericho.
Wow. But you've never actually looked like that. Like you didn't do that for any match or anything.
No,
right?
even put the
Yeah.
chest hair on there that Paul Stanley
wow.
has.
Oh, that's great.
Those-
Did you
Those
have
are a
any?
couple cool ones of people being creative.
Sorry, I lied. I said last question, but this just came to my head. Did you get any like Mexican bootlegs in your time in Mexico early in your career?
I didn't. I don't think there was. There was a couple T-shirts that they made, but I don't recall
Things like
any
that.
actual action figures being made. Because if there was, I probably would have tried to grab it. Unless you guys know something I don't.
I'm trying to think. I don't think so. Because usually the mask guys are pretty easy to like knock off.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
since
They
you
made
didn't
a
wear
couple
mask-
bootleg T-shirts there, but action figures weren't as much of a thing in the mid '90s as they became once I went to WCW.
Cool.
All right, well, Chris, I mean, one of the most, if not the most toyetic man in wrestling history, still getting new figures after all these years. And
Yeah.
I'm glad we were able to have you on the show. Thank you very much, Chris.
Well, congrats, guys, and after the new ones come out, we'll have to do it again and discuss all of the bubbly details. So, congratulations, guys, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chris, man. Appreciate it.